Happy to be back here in LA because I'm traveling a lot, y'all. I do a lot of traveling for comedy, so whenever I can do shows here in LA, like, I love it. I love it, absolutely. I love my LA audience because y'all not easy to please. Because there's a lot of shit going on in LA. Like, it's like, am I gonna go to the comedy show or am I gonna go to the Grammys, bitch? Like, I get it. I get it. I get it. I know there was a drink with this ticket, so I know that's why y'all here. Thank you for coming. We appreciate that. I've been doing a lot of traveling. I was just recently in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. No. They tricked me. They had a bitch excited for nothing. Okay? When I landed, I was excited. The comedy club sent me a little email. They were like, we got you in the best hotel in town. Let me tell y'all something. When someone says, it's the best hotel in town, look at the town, motherfucker. Because that's saying a lot. Like if they had booked me at the Ritz-Carlton, they would have said, like, bitch, you going to the Ritz. They wouldn't say the best hotel in town. The best hotel in town make me think that every other hotel is a motel. You understand me? So I get there, I pull up, y'all, to the Fantasy World Hotel. I check in. The girl behind the counter is all excited. She's like, are you the comic for the weekend? I say, yeah. She goes, they broke the bank with your room. I said, oh, shit. I thought I had me a suite or something. I said, what they did? She said, they gave you one of our themed rooms. Now, I said, bitch, what's the theme? Because I might not like that shit. I don't like what you like, you know? She goes, well, they gave you our Western-themed room. Now, I'm from California. I heard West. I said, hell yeah, take me to the West Coast room. I thought it was going to be pictures of Nipsey on the wall and shit. Make a bitch comfortable in Canada. You know? I get off the elevator, y'all. I got to the front of the hotel room door. Now, ain't nothing supposed to be on that except the hotel room number. There was a picture of a horse's face. And I'm not talking about like some majestic black beauty. The horse was I'm like, this motherfucker's gonna bite. This was a lot for the front of the door. What's behind? I'm nervous. I open the door. It's a huge hotel room, but it's weird as hell. In the middle of the room, there was a hot tub. This bothered me. Because cowboys didn't have that shit. If we stick in the theme, bitch. And then I'm looking at it, and it wasn't even like they put any effort. I'm talking about the hot tub was carpet adjacent. There was no tile. I'm like, this is an above ground pool in the motherfucking room. This nasty. But they were paying, so I'm like, we can deal with it. So I started looking around the room, trying to capture the theme a little bit more. There's pictures of like cactuses and cowboys and just white people shit everywhere. Then I get to the bed. My bed, y'all, was a life-size replica of a horse and carriage, complete with wheels. Yeah, the motherfucker moved if you did too much. And I'm talking about, you fart, it send you across the room. And that's not even the weird part. At the head of the bed, where I'm laying all night, there was a life-size mannequin of a white man who was riding the horse that was pulling my bed. I'm like, this is Harriet Tubman's dorm room. Get me the fuck out of here. Fantasy world. Whose fantasy is this? This is some weird shit. Black people don't fantasize about no shit like that. The Western time, hell no. We was going through some shit. We don't fantasize about that. We don't talk about that, but the 29 days of February this year, we gonna talk about that. That's it. That hotel had me nervous, y'all. I damn near had to use a green book to get to the bathroom. I'm like, this is a lot for me. No, I just knew. I'm like, any moment, Jonathan Major's finna come out of somewhere and call me his Coretta. Where is this nigga? They be confusing us because we got the same hair, but it ain't me, bitch. I did not choke you. You know? So, I'm stressed out in this hotel room. I'm like, I got 5 days in this bitch. I'm like, there's no way that I can get through these nights without at least smoking some weed, because it's a lot for me. Get to the comedy club, start talking to some of the comics. One of them comes up to me. He's like, Kalea, you came from LA, right? I'm like, yeah. He was like, do you smoke weed? I'm like, this weekend, yes. Yes. Got me in this antebellum hotel room, yeah. And he's like, well, do you want to kick it after the show? I'll get you some tree, da-da-da-da. I'm like, yeah, we can kick it. He's like, oh, I don't live far from Edmonton. Now, I don't just hop in the car with any old white person. So I need to know exactly where I'm going. I'm like, well, where are we going? He's like, well, my hometown is the next town over. Y'all can Google it. I said, well, what's the name of the town? This man looked me in my eyes. And I was like, oh, it's a little city called Slave Lake. I looked at him. That was the first time I had ever called a white person nigga. I said, nigga, what? You not about to have me sleeping in this Mason-Dixon line hotel room and smoking slave weed. I've seen this movie, motherfucker. I was looking for Jordan Peele, like, nope, get out. What is this? I'm never going back. I did learn a little something, though. I learned a little something while I was there. Y'all ever heard of poutine? Yeah. Okay, well, I hadn't. Y'all, I'm at this restaurant. I thought me and the waitress was flirting with each other. You hear me? Because we vibing a little bit. She gonna come up to me after my meal and she was like, can I interest you in some dessert poutine? I said, hell yeah, you could interest me in some dessert pussy. Why? What we got going on? I didn't know. I followed the bitch to the back. I did not know that poutine was French fries with cheese curds and gravy. I said, bitch, you need to call that shit French fries with cheese and gravy. Because it sounds like pussy to me. You ask me if I want some poutine, I'm thinking we about to be gum to gum, bitch. You hear me? And I'll be dental damned if you waste my time up in here. I don't got no time to waste. Because, like, in my defense, like, poutine sound like something I'm going to call it about 30 years from now. You understand me? Right? Like, when you stop wearing panties full time, it's a poutine. What you doing today? Oh, just chilling, letting my poutine air out because it's hot. I didn't know. That bitch done ruined my favorite food. I can't eat French fries without getting moist. Like, Five Guys is a problem for me with what the fuck they be doing with the poutine over there. About a month ago, y'all, I was in Omaha, Nebraska. I know. Y'all, I feel like I'm on a civil rights tour right now. Everywhere we were done wrong, nigga, I'm here to do it right. Soon as we landed, I turned my phone on and said that it was 6 degrees outside. I said, bitch, of separation? Because we're not talking about the air. That's a lot. 6 degrees. My dad called me. He's like, Kalea, you need to turn your location on. It ain't no black people in Omaha. Turn my location on. And I start mulling around the city a little bit. I like to get to know places. That's how I connect with my audience, especially like if I've never been there before, my first show. And it was like the longer I was there, the more I realized I don't think that there are no black people in Omaha. I just think that is that cold. That folk are ashy as fuck. In Omaha. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to put lotion on in 6 degree, bitch, it go back in the bottle. It's not coming on. Right now, it's niggas translucent in Omaha as we speak. And like, I came to this scientific conclusion because after my first show, I'm doing meet and greet, and a whole ass white lady come up to me. And she was like, that shit was funny as hell, my nigga. And I looked at her. Because nobody else thought this was weird but me. I looked at her a little closer. I did like this right here. I said, oh shit, thank you, sis. Appreciate you. She was ashy. I almost quit comedy on the spot. I'm like, if I just sell Vaseline in Omaha, I could be Wanda Buffett out this motherfucker. I don't need to tell jokes. You know, they teased me when I first got there. When I got to the club, when I walked in, I had my little mask on. Y'all remember the little mask? The little N95 mask, had my mask on. Hostess says to me, ugh, you must be the LA comic. Because you're so COVID conscious. I'm looking at this bitch, it's 6 degrees. I said, bitch, I'm trying to keep my lips from falling off my fucking face right now. Cause you gotta understand I'm a lesbian, this is my dick, this is all I got. I don't play about my mouth. If you see me with a mask, it ain't got shit to do with the disease. Like, bitch, I got somewhere to be tonight. And I'm trying to protect this shit. I can't be walking up in no woman's house with chapped dick. You hear me? She not gonna wanna see the rest of the package. 6 degrees, that's shrinkage. Would you pull your dick out in 6 degrees, sir? It would disappear. That's how I can't be eating pussy like that. Hell no. That's why I ain't let no white girls eat me out yet, because that's how their lips look. I'm like, bitch, you bit me. Ouch. I don't like that. You know? I wanna get a quick feel for y'all real quick. Make some noise if you got your asses whooped as children. That's why you're good people. Nobody in here was gently parented, were they? Wasn't nothing gentle about it. No. You can't do that anymore. You can't whoop kids' ass. I mean, you can, but not like in Target. You get in trouble for that shit. You end up on TikTok and all that. That's some bullshit. Because I got 2 young nieces, so I'm learning a lot about, like, school-age kids through them. Like, that sounded weird. No R. Kelly shit, but you get what I'm saying. Did you know that if your child has a birthday during the school year, and they have a birthday party, that it is highly suggested that they invite the entire class to the birthday party so that nobody feels left out? Did you know that? That's some bullshit. Because it's like, back in our day, if somebody had a birthday, bitch, and everybody got an invite but you knew you had some shit to work on, motherfucker. Change yourself. You know what I'm talking about? Like, we going to Chuck E. Cheese, you staying. And don't come to school on Monday, because we gonna be talking about that shit. You gotta start faking the tummy ache, like, right after church, bitch. Because you weren't invited. Now all these kids think they good people, because everybody getting the invite. I'm on the flight the other day. Soon as we land, flight attendant goes running past me on the flight. I thought it was a goddamn emergency. There was an unaccompanied minor couple rows back. She goes up to him, gives him a sticker, and says, congratulations. Now I'm looking at the little boy, because I ain't see him do shit. Now I was drunk, so I could have missed it. But I didn't see it. So I look at him, I was like, hey man, I was like, what'd you do, man? You got a sticker, what'd you do? I talk to kids the same way I talk to my dog. What'd you do? He just looked at me. I was like, all right, I get it, because this is a lot in the airport. I'm put together. In the airport, bitch, I'm they, them all the way. You don't know what the fuck going on. Just give me the tequila, bitch. Don't worry about it. So basically scared the shit out of this little boy. So then I look at the flight attendant. I was like, ma'am, I was like, what did he do? I was like, you told him congratulations. Let's give him a shout out or something. What did he do? She looked at me. And she was like, well, you know, he made it through the flight. Without crying. I said, bitch, give me. So did I. What are we talking about? So did I. Like, if you don't want me to be drunk at 8 a.m., don't open the Delta Lounge, bitch. Give me my fucking sticker. I done sat on that flight. I watched The Fox and the Hound. I watched The Notebook, and I did not shed a tear. Like, I deserve something for that. Those movies are sad sober, so listen. So I'm not gonna lie to you. I bumped into the little boy on the jetway, and I took his shit. Welcome to the world, motherfucker. Now, I'm Delta's #1 junior pilot. You hear me? Y'all think I'm bullshitting. This is the sticker right here that I took for that motherfucker. And that's for you. Yeah. Congratulations. Give it up for my girl right here. You like that shit, don't you? You single? Oh, she nervous now. Yeah. Black History Month coming up. You single? Because I need a 29-day sponsor, bitch. You here for it?